Welcome back, everybody, to Dungeon Brew. Diana and I are continuing our conversation about narrative design. Today, we're going to be talking about settlement design. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Dungeon Brew.
Welcome back, everybody, to Dungeon Brew. We are continuing our conversation about narrative design, and today, Diana and I are talking about settlements, this specific type of content that you're trying to create to bring your story together. Diana, why don't you start us off and tell us what's a settlement?
Well, the settlement, it's kind of a big question. It could be anything from like a roadhouse, like just a little building off to the side, with a couple little, necessary things here and there, to a village, to a town, to a city, to a giant metropolis or something. And you can have, just like a handful of people, maybe like a single family, just that kind of happens to live there, on the road you're passing through, or you can have thousands of people that are there. It really just kind of comes down to your story, to what it is that you are trying to fulfill, or why that town is there.
Yeah, and John and I have an entire series where we go through each one of those particular types of settlements and how to create them and what to consider when you're developing them. So you and I probably don't need to spend tons of time rehashing out every detail. But I do think that we want to talk about, in the course of narrative design, what you want to consider when you're creating these. For me, I usually kind of break it down into three different areas. And the first one, I think we can probably spend the most amount of time on, is why does it exist? Like, that's the first question you should ask when you're creating any settlement, whether it's just a roadhouse or a tavern off to the side, or an inn that's just in the middle of nowhere for adventurers to stop, or if it's a village or a larger city. Why does this place exist? Why did you create it? What is its purpose?
Yeah, and of course, at this point you need to very much or you need to all. I guess you don't necessarily have to already have your quest in mind. It could be the start of your quest if you start out, up on this road where you come across this little town and you find out what's going on, and that kind of sets the story. But I think it really just kind of comes down to your quest and making sure that it's going to connect well to not just the overarching plot of the story, but make room, I think, for the little I guess decisions to be made, different directions you could be going.
Yeah, and that's a good point. You have to think about the different choices that the character can make, and how complex the story is going to be. So, whatever settlement you're creating, you need to make sure that there are options within that settlement. That is, if they branch off in a different direction, do you have an option for that, so that they
Mm,
can then explore that option as well?
yeah. So when you start with building a town, I guess how do you decide on your why? Are you looking more from the realm of or from the, I guess, perspective of the start of a story, or when your characters are just kind of going along
Well,
their quest?
in a TTRPG, I mean, we're going to be talking about quest creation a little bit later too, but you've already developed the quest lines, you've already created the storylines, you already have the arc. So I'm not just creating something and then seeing where it goes. I have already planned out every NPC, where my settlements are, what my quests are, what's going to happen. So I have a purpose behind that settlement that I created. I wouldn't just create an inn and have people in it and have them just randomly throw out some idea and see where the characters go with it. There are pinpointed or concepts that are there in quests that are there that you can choose from. So in my current game that I'm managing, my players came to a roadhouse. They engaged with the innkeeper. The innkeeper gave them a quest board, if you will, of ideas of what they could do. But every one of those quest lines are already mapped out, and all of them intertwine into my larger plot. So it doesn't matter what my characters choose. Every quest leads to my bigger plot, but I give them options on what they want to go choose and do. And it gives me a purpose for why my settlement is there, why I created that settlement in the first place, to be that launch pad into my story.
Yeah, I know this is going to be this is going to be a learning opportunity for me because again, I'm not a GM. And so when I think about, building things like towns, I'm coming from a different kind of, perspective. I have already done my world building. I have already, set up different towns and different places and
Mm-hmm.
the types of people and what, uh in what area of the world they're in. So I think I come from town building in a little bit of a different direction than you do, but I'm curious how you intertwine the driving force into that aspect of why the town's there.
Oh, you mean in terms of like why the town exists? Yeah. So
Mhm.
in the grander scheme, like the second thing that we would be looking at is that driving force. Like so, I have why does it exist for the storytelling aspect, and then why does this town exist in the world of itself, which can be a number of different things. I mean, it could be that the town provides certain resources. Like maybe they are a mining company or they have a forestry company in a smaller village, and that wood is then delivered regularly off to the larger city, to the king, because they have some sort of agreement, or maybe they need that wood to trade off to the local fishing village so they can have food that comes into the town. Maybe that town is on the edge of the world. I think of Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time, where they have the towns that are positioned along the Blight that serve as a defense against the darkness that is imposing onto the rest of the world. And so it's like this defensive last stand against whatever darkness may come. But there's always some sort of purpose behind why that town is built, why it exists in the way that it does. And we see this in our own history too. I mean, if we were looking at early civilization of people, as we built towns within the Fertile Crescent or along the Nile, every village, every town that was created had a fundamental purpose for why it was put there and why it was put in that location. You wouldn't go and build yourself a town at the top of a mountain without having the availability to resources to keep the people there alive.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think about in my own storytelling at this point, I'm in this town that I've created as
Mm-hmm.
sort of like it is the entrance to what's called the Everdark, which is this forest that is full of, these darker creatures. It's not a safe place to travel, but there
Mm-hmm.
is a single safe road that you can access from Shargrove, from that
Mm-hmm.
little town. Um, but but I think that kind of it also has the point. I mean, I guess that would be the point of interest, right? I know that was one of the talking points you had said when it comes to building your town. The point of interest, in Shargrove for my writing would be that road, the safe road to get through the Everdark.
Yeah, it's a place for your party or your company to come through and be able to kind of get a reprieve from the dangerous world that's surrounding them, so they can find food, they can find shelter, get their basic necessities met within that location, which serves it in its own right for that settlement just to be a point of interest. Though you might also have points of interest within that settlement that again are intertwined within your bigger quest or your bigger plot that you're presenting. Maybe there's a temple to the damned that's there to be investigated, where there's worship to the Blood Queen, and this particular temple is renowned throughout the world, where they do child sacrifices, and it leaves a bad taste in the character's mouth, and so they want to go explore it or investigate it further to see what's going on. Maybe you have something as simple as a roadhouse that is up the curve of a mountain on the way to some sage that lives at the top that imparts wisdom to the adventurers. That at this roadhouse there is Clara, the beautiful mistress of the innkeeper, who sings the grandest songs that anyone in the realm has ever heard. And so people come long and far just to hear her voice and to hear her sing. So having like those intriguing little pinpoints on the map that characters can hear about and hear rumors about that draw them to locations really can help again bring that story to life.
Yeah, and it makes it interesting and exciting and keeps the whole I mean, it gives again the player or the character, more opportunity, more I think just excitement to have something to do besides
Mm-hmm.
just, going A to B and getting the story done. I think that's my favorite thing about open world gaming is being able to, talk to somebody and they mention another part of the
Mm-hmm.
map, and then, you have that whole journey to get to that side of the map. But it keeps you immersed,
Yeah,
which I think is, I mean, that's the end goal.
and TTRPGs, beautifully enough, as we've mentioned before in this series, are like they're the epitome of what open world gaming is because you can always expand in another direction depending on the choices that the characters make and the story that you're telling together. As a GM, being able to build those settlements and make them feel full of life and have a purpose and give it I don't know, memorable moments for the characters, I think is the real challenge. Now, like I said, John and I go through a whole series where we break down the hamlet and the village and the city and all these different locations about what you want to consider. And we talk about what your mood or your ambiance is within that location. what the layout is of the buildings and how you structure them, what the demographics, the population looks like for the particular settlement, government, wealth, military, religion, what your mercantile trades might be, what your corruption looks like within the city, and then how it falls within the story itself. And we go into a lot of detail in each one of those videos about how each one of those settlements differs on each one of those factors. So that's worth checking out. But as a GM, you are considering all of those things as you're building these settlements up.
Yeah, I think that's my favorite part of just world building is being able to go into each little city or village and giving them their backstory, giving them a sense of purpose to exist, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
and giving, your character that opportunity to create a sort of connection to the place and to the people there and
Mm-hmm.
keep them excited about the game.
Yeah, me too. I love backstories. You mentioned your book, and I've been currently working on my own that's based heavily on Sumerian and Mesopotamian myth and legend and lore, and all the city-states that existed there between the two rivers of the Tigris and the Euphrates had a purpose to them. The temples that were built had a purpose to them. The people that were placed into kingship had a purpose behind them. And so when you think about any type of settlement that you're creating, any element that you're bringing forth to your players' attention that you're kind of sharing with them should have some sort of history attached, some backstory to it, something that draws them to it that, again, it just adds that flair to your world and makes it feel more immersed into it. Like, this place is so much bigger than I ever thought it could be. And even the smallest, simplest little details add so much. In just our examples, just saying, oh yeah, you go to this one town in the middle of the dark woods where they worship the Blood Queen. What? It's like I don't even have to have the Queen yet developed. I don't even have to have a storyline developed there, but just mentioning that and seeing if it perks their interest, and they go, "We're going there. We want to go check that out." That tells me, all right, next week I'm going to develop this backstory behind the Blood Queen because that intrigued them, where they maybe weren't so interested in the band of pirates that were raiding the shores in the Westlands. So it's whatever, you just give little pieces, and as your characters show interest, then you build out the rest of it and take them in that direction.
And this is why I can't be a GM because I would sit there, they would ask questions and be all intrigued, and I'd be like, let me tell you everything right now. And sit there for 4 hours just giving them the backstory of the Blood Queen.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you guys are enjoying the series and this is something that you would like to see more of, please make sure you're hitting the subscribe button, following us. We have a lot more that's going to be coming out, not only in the series around narrative design, but also the other series that we're running on Dungeon Brew. Diana, anything else on settlement development that you want to talk about? Settlement creation before we let them go?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if we want to go into the things, like you were saying about the actual town creation, the moods and the demographics and entertainment, religion. I think that just kind of goes more into the entire aspect of world building. I mean, you
Mm-hmm.
have to make sure that your town is going to, once again, make sense with your world to
Mm-hmm.
keep that suspension of disbelief going. Because if like you said, you have suddenly a town on the top of a mountain, and there's no way that they can possibly exist up there. They're,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's because it's too cold or there just are no
Mm-hmm.
resources, then I think that just kind of takes away from the believability, which is, I mean, the biggest part of all of storytelling, whether it's through gaming or books or whatever.
Yeah, and just like we talked about with our NPC development, I think this is the important aspect of settlement development. It's got to be believable and it needs to have a purpose. Have those two things attached to it. Don't go wandering your adventurers through a town just for the sake of having a town, because they're going to pick up on every little detail in there, being like, oh, what's this? What's it? Why is this here? Why can I interact with this? And if there's no purpose to interacting with it, they're going to feel empty inside.
Yeah,
They're gonna
break their hearts.
cry in a corner and eat a lot of pound cake. All right, so that's what I have for this specifically. Is just remembering that those are the important things. Settlements are just as important as any other aspect of the game. Make sure that they have a purpose, and make sure that you have all those factors put in there so that they're believable.
Welcome to Dungeon